The sound that woke me up wasn't birds or coyotes or even my busted old wind chime that rattled every time the breeze hiccuped. It was a bulldozer, a real, full-sized orange monster groaning and grumbling like it had a personal grudge against my backyard. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, wearing nothing but a pair of cargo shorts and holding a half-filled coffee mug. I followed the sound around back, expecting maybe roadwork or some neighbor's stupid landscaping project. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. That thing was in my yard. It was halfway through flattening the old shed I'd built 2 years ago, my little wood and metal Frankenstein where I kept my tools, generator, and solar batteries, or I used to. Because right now it looked like a sad pile of splinters being dragged across the dirt by that machine's big steel teeth. "Hey!" I yelled, waving my arms. "That's my shed!" The guy driving didn't hear me over the roar, or maybe he just didn't care. There was a second guy nearby in a reflective vest and holding a clipboard. He looked up at me like I was the one trespassing. "You Kyle Benton?" he asked, totally unfazed by the fact that his coworker had just obliterated 300 pounds of my property. "Yeah, and that's my damn building." He gave a little shrug. HOA issued an order. Non-compliant structure within visual range of the parkway. Deconstruction authorized. I stared at him, my eye twitching just slightly. "I don't have an HOA. "Not according to our updated jurisdiction map," he said, flipping a page on his clipboard like he was announcing the weather. That's when I took out my phone, hit record, and calmly said into the mic, "Saturday, 6:14 a.m. My shed is being leveled by strangers with construction equipment who claim they're working for an HOA I don't belong to. No paperwork shown. No warning given. Welcome to Willow Crest." The clipboard guy didn't like that. He muttered something about liability shields and walked off. I just stood there sipping what was left of my coffee, watching the last piece of my shed crunch under a metal tread. You ever have that moment? The one where the universe taps you on the shoulder and whispers, "Hey buddy, you're about to have the most exhausting few weeks of your life?" That was mine. 2 years earlier, I bought 10 acres just outside Evergreen, Colorado. I'd done my time. 15 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, building forward operating bases in places where paved roads meant gravel and prayer. When I got out, I didn't want suburbia. I didn't want a mailbox with fake stone trim or a neighbor named Rick who judged my grass height. I wanted land, real, quiet land. And I found it. A narrow valley with a view of the mountains, a spring-fed creek, and 0 HOAs within shouting distance. I double-checked that before I signed a damn thing. No covenants, no dues, no nosy neighbors telling me I couldn't paint my shutters burnt orange if I felt like it. Just me, my solar rig, and a 2-bedroom cabin I built from the ground up, one beam at a time. I put in a gravel driveway, a modest off-grid setup, and that little shed the bulldozer had just fed to the gods of misplaced paperwork. I even planted a few apple trees and started building a smokehouse out back. For a while, it was paradise. Then Willow Crest Enclave showed up, or more specifically, Willow Crest HOA. They came in fast. Some developer bought up the old cattle land that bordered my southern fence line and built one of those eco-modern neighborhoods. You know the type. Identical boxy houses with solar panels, yoga porches, and community gardens full of vegetables nobody eats. At first, I didn't care. They were on their side of the line. I was on mine, and that's how I liked it. But then their HOA president, a woman named Cheryl Goldstein, decided my slice of freedom didn't match the aesthetic vision of the new community. And that's when the letters started. It started with a letter taped to my mailbox, not mailed, taped. On HOA letterhead, with a cheery little sun logo in the corner, it read, "Dear resident, you are in violation of Willow Crest Enclave Community Design Code, Section 4.1.3.2. Unauthorized structure, tool shed, visible from neighborhood common area. Please remove or relocate within 14 days to avoid administrative action." I stood there holding the paper like it was a prank. I even looked around to see if someone was filming. Nope. Just me, my dog, and a squirrel judging me from the fence post. I walked the whole length of my property line just to be sure. The shed wasn't on their land. Hell, it wasn't even close to it. It was tucked behind my cabin, 60 feet from the southern boundary and partially blocked by a hill. Only way they could even see it was if they climbed up on something and went looking. Which, apparently, they had. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the fire barrel. A week later, another one showed up. This time printed on heavier paper like they thought cardstock made it more legal. Final notice. Failure to comply with Willow Crest aesthetic standards will result in immediate enforcement and possible fines. I ignored that one too. I figured once they realized I wasn't one of their little khaki-wearing HOA minions, they'd move on. I was wrong. About 3 days after the second letter, I caught a man on my land. Middle-aged, too clean for a rancher, khakis, golf shirt, little HOA badge clipped to his pocket like it meant something. He was taking pictures of my shed with his phone. I walked right up, slow and casual. My dog, Scout, trotted beside me, tail up. "Morning," I said, stopping 10 feet from him. "You need something?" He jumped a little, then tried to play it cool. Just documenting non-compliant structures." "Interesting," I said. "You documenting them for a history book? Because this here's private land." He puffed up a little. "Willow Crest Enclave has extended jurisdiction over this region per our revised boundary plan. We sent out multiple notices." "Yeah, I got your crayon scribbles," I said, tapping my temple. "Still not in your HOA. Never was, never will be." He clicked one more photo. "You'll be hearing from the board." "Great," I said. "Tell the board they owe me a new pair of boots if they keep trespassing. The last guy stepped in a wasp nest." He left without another word. Scout barked once, just for emphasis. I figured that'd be the end of it. Then came the bulldozer. After they crushed the shed, I did what any sane person would do. I went to the county recorder's office and pulled my parcel file. No surprise, my land was clean. Independent lot, zoned rural agricultural, no HOA agreements on record, no easements granted, no cross-property usage rights, nothing. But when I asked to see any maps filed by Willow Crest Enclave, the clerk, a wiry old guy with a buzz cut and an unamused expression, raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you're that guy," he said, flipping through a drawer. "Meaning?" I asked. "They tried filing an amendment 2 months ago, wanted to incorporate peripheral parcels for visual alignment purposes." He made air quotes. "Which is a fancy way of saying they wanted to make the land around their subdivision match their magazine covers." "Did it go through?" He snorted. "Denied, twice, but they're persistent little bastards." I left with a fresh copy of my parcel boundaries and the county's denial stamp in bold red ink. Then I drove straight to my friend Cam's workshop. Cam's a welder with a bad attitude and better tools than God. I gave him the sketch I drew on the back of a napkin and said, "I want this mounted on 4 steel poles." 3 days later, I had a 10-foot wide gate sign that read, "Private property, not an HOA. Touch anything and I'll bill you by the inch." Scout approved, but Cheryl and her clipboard squad? Not so much. It didn't take long for the escalation. Next thing I know, they're holding a community improvement event at the edge of their property, which just so happens to include volunteers planting trees along my southern fence line. Except the trees weren't on their land. They were on mine. I walked up with a thermos of coffee, leaned on the fence, and said, "Just curious, are the trees here part of your landscaping, or are y'all just trying to terraform my property into a botanical hostage situation?" One of the volunteers, a guy who looked like a retired dentist, froze mid-shovel. A woman in yoga pants stepped forward, clearly trying to channel her inner HOA warrior. "This greenbelt area is a planned community visual buffer. We have every right to—" "No, you don't," I cut in. "And if one more root touches my soil, I'm charging you rent." I walked them back off my property line, politely, firmly, like I was guiding raccoons out of a garage. But I knew this wasn't over. Cheryl wasn't the type to back down just because she was in the wrong. She was the type to double down and dig deeper, which unfortunately for her was exactly what she did. And the hole she dug? Well, she had no idea I was the one holding the shovel. The first real punch came on a Tuesday. I'd just come back from town with a truckload of gravel for the driveway, only to find a bright orange construction cone parked square in the middle of it. Not beside it, on it, with a laminated sign zip-tied to the cone. "Future site of Willow Crest Community Walking Trail. Access path in progress. Do not disturb." I stared at it for a second, trying to figure out if I was having a stroke. Nope. Just HOA fantasy spilling into real life. A brand new gravel path had been cut across the southern edge of my land, maybe 5 feet wide, winding like a hiking trail from the Willow Crest fence line toward a little cluster of their model homes. It wasn't subtle. Someone had used a sod cutter and laid down crushed stone like they were prepping a damn nature reserve. They even installed 2 solar lanterns and a little bench. A bench. On my land. That bench was what finally broke me. I took pictures. Then I picked up the cone and the sign and gently relocated them to the HOA's main entrance, right in front of Cheryl Goldstein's beloved welcome sign. I might have added a handwritten sticky note that said, "Lost something?" That afternoon, she called me. "Mr. Benton," she said in her clipped passive-aggressive tone, "you've interfered with a designated improvement project." "You mean the one you installed without permission on land you don't own?" "It's a public visual access trail, part of our expanded easement overlay. You'll find that in our latest development plans." I actually laughed. Ma'am, the only overlay you've got is fantasy. You're a subdivision president, not a land baron. She hung up without another word. The next morning, the bench was gone. But the problem wasn't. The day after that, I noticed trucks coming down the HOA road, landscapers, survey crews, and one guy with a drone buzzing over my back pasture like he was casing the place for a hostage rescue. Then came the letters. Not from the HOA this time, from a law firm in Denver. Fancy logo, serif font, heavy envelope that practically bled condescension. The first page accused me of obstructing community development, willful noncompliance, and violating a binding view easement. Never mind that no such easement existed. Page 2 listed proposed fines totaling $11,750 for things like unauthorized structural contrast, my red tool shed, may it rest in peace, unregulated solar installations visible from the community road, and my personal favorite, hostile signage. Apparently my gate sign hurt someone's feelings. I called their bluff, wrote back, attached a copy of my deed, my survey maps, and a very polite note that said, in legal terms, "Your entire argument is made of warm pudding. Please stop embarrassing yourselves." I didn't hear back for a week. Then came the next escalation. They paved a road through my property. Let me say that again, just in case your brain short-circuited like mine did. They paved a private road through my damn property. No permit, no notice, no permission. I came home from the hardware store and found a fresh ribbon of asphalt, black, still steaming, curving like a snake across the lower portion of my lot, connecting the end of the HOA's cul-de-sac to the far edge of my field, right over my drainage ditch. They'd even painted white lines and staked a sign, Willow Crest South Entry, private access, residents only. They'd built their own road, through my land, and then claimed it for themselves. I was still standing there, jaw half open, when a black SUV with Willow Crest branding pulled up beside me. The window rolled down and out popped the same smug mug from before, Cheryl Goldstein. "Good afternoon, Mr. Benton," she said like she was offering me a tray of cookies. "I hope you're ready to integrate." "Into what?" I asked. "The community. The board voted unanimously to include your parcel in our revised jurisdictional overlay." "There it is again," I said. "That word, overlay. You keep saying it like it means something." She smiled like a shark. "We're working with the county to update zoning classifications. It's for everyone's benefit. Cohesive land use, unified standards." "You're trespassing," I said. She motioned to the road crew finishing up striping the new pavement. "We're improving access for emergency response, fire lanes, you understand." I looked her dead in the eye. "You paved a fire lane through my apple trees." She tilted her head. "Then perhaps you should reconsider your landscaping. It's very unstructured." That was the moment I decided to stop playing defense. It was time to fight back. I figured maybe this could still be resolved like reasonable adults. I mean, sure, they'd bulldozed my shed, planted trees on my land, carved out a walking trail, and now poured a full asphalt road through my property without so much as a text. But I was trying not to be the guy who jumped straight to war over HOA nonsense. I gave them a chance. I drove down to the county zoning office with a binder full of maps, photos, timestamps, and a very patient attitude. The woman at the counter was polite. She even offered me coffee. Then she pulled up their system. "Huh," she said, frowning at the screen. "That can't be right." "Love hearing that," I said. "What's not right?" "It says here your parcel's been conditionally approved for subdivision overlay into Willow Crest Enclave. Provisional tag. Status, pending board ratification." "Board?" I asked. "The zoning board," she said, still squinting at the monitor. "It's an automated flag, got triggered last month when Willow Crest filed an annexation request." I never consented to that. "You wouldn't need to," she said slowly. "Not under provisional overlay standards. They just have to show a shared use corridor, like a road or utility line, and submit their development plan. Once it clears review." "Stop," I said. "I own that road, the access lane. It's a private easement, deeded to me with the parcel. I own it." She paused. "You're sure?" "I can draw the survey map from memory." She leaned in, voice low. "Look, if they paved through your land without a permit, they're in violation, but these filings move fast. If the board finalizes that overlay, you're going to have a hell of a time rolling it back." I left with a copy of the filing, a sinking feeling, and no coffee. Next stop was the sheriff's office. I showed Deputy Carlson the pictures of the road and the map of my property lines. He whistled through his teeth. "They paved that without telling you?" "No permit, no letter, no nothing." He nodded slowly, then opened a desk drawer and pulled out a form. "All right," he said. File a formal complaint for trespassing and property damage. I'll get someone out there to take a statement." "When?" "Couple days." "A couple days?" I asked. He held up his hands. "Hey, you're not the only one dealing with HOA insanity. We've had 4 other calls this month, people getting fined for bird feeders. One guy's truck got towed for visual pollution, and you're out in unincorporated county, adds layers." I filled out the form anyway. And then I called a lawyer. His name was Marcus Webb, real estate litigator, talked like he'd rather be fishing, but billed like he ate gold for breakfast. I showed him everything, photos, videos, the maps, the sign, the bulldozer, the trail, the road. He flipped through the stack, nodding. "Classic overreach," he said. "HOA expands too fast, gets cocky, starts pretending they own everything in sight." "Can we stop them?" "Eventually. We'd file for a declaratory judgment, then seek an injunction on development activity across your parcel." "How long does that take?" He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Best case scenario, 90 days, more likely 6 months, and that's if the judge doesn't punt." "So they get to just keep building while I wait?" "Pretty much." He slid the folder back to me and added, "And just so you know, you'll be footing the bill. HOAs always claim they're acting in the interest of the community, so they hide behind insurance. You'll win, but they'll bleed you trying." I left his office with 2 choices, wait and bleed or fight on my terms. Guess which one I picked. The next morning, I was walking the fence line when I saw movement by the new South Entry sign. A maintenance crew, 2 guys with paint rollers and a ladder. They were putting up a decorative arch over my road. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone and started filming. They ignored me, finished painting, packed up their van and drove off like it was just another Tuesday. An hour later, a delivery truck came through the arch and parked on my pasture. 2 guys stepped out and started unloading landscaping stones, like they were planning a garden party in my orchard. That was it. I wasn't waiting for lawyers or letters anymore. I was done being reasonable. It was time to get clever. I started with the one thing the HOA clearly never expected: research. Not just Googling either. I mean real, boots on the ground, courthouse, and coffee-stained microfilm kind of research. First stop? My title records. Turns out, when I bought my land, I also inherited a little sliver of dirt that most folks forgot existed. A narrow, 20-foot wide strip that used to be a private farm road, long since abandoned, but still legally on the books. And guess where it ran? Dead center underneath the South Entry road the HOA just paved. They didn't pave on their land, they paved on mine. Even better, that forgotten easement connected straight back to the main county road, which meant legally the HOA had no right to use it unless I gave them access, which I hadn't, which I wouldn't, and just like that, the shiny new road they were parading around like a new toy. It belonged to me. I called my buddy Nate, a licensed surveyor and the kind of guy who gets excited over topography maps. I helped him rebuild his roof after a windstorm last year, so he owed me. He came out the next morning with his truck, drone, gear, and a thermos of black sludge he called coffee. 3 hours later, we had a full 3D scan of the road overlay. Nate walked me through it. "See that line?" he said, pointing at the tablet. "That's your deeded boundary, and this entire paved surface, it's across it, about 2 feet inside, the whole way. And that strip connecting to the county road. Also yours." I grinned. "I think it's time we built a fence." 2 days later, with the help of Nate and a few willing ranch buddies, we put up a 10-foot steel gate across my road. Nothing fancy, just solid chain link with a locking bar, a pair of concrete footings, and a sign, "Private Easement, access by permission. Only, violators will be treated to a strongly worded letter and a very unhappy owner." Then I parked my truck sideways behind it for good measure. The next morning, the chaos started. It was 7:42 a.m. when the first car pulled up. A silver Lexus, one of those HOA people with white teeth and a Bluetooth headset glued to her ear. She stopped, stared at the gate, and laid on the horn like it was going to unlock the universe. I sipped my coffee from the porch and waved. She rolled down the window and shouted, "You can't block this road. This is community access." "Nope," I called back. "It's a private easement, and you're not invited." "I'll call the HOA." "You do that." 5 minutes later, Cheryl Goldstein showed up in a black SUV, marching up like she was storming the beaches of Normandy. "Mr. Benton," she barked, "this is a clear violation of community connectivity standards." I smiled. Weird. Community connectivity standards aren't in the county zoning code, but deeded ownership? That's real. You can't just lock out residents. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out a folder. "This," I said, handing it to her, "is a certified copy of my property deed showing the exact boundaries of the easement you paved over without consent. Also included my recent filing with the county asserting full control over road use, and a letter from my attorney stating that you are now trespassing. She flipped through it, face slowly draining of color. "You'll regret this," she said finally. I grinned wider. I doubt that. Then I shut the gate behind her and locked it. What happened next was pure, beautiful HOA grade panic. Residents couldn't access the south entry, emergency vehicles had to reroute, deliveries got missed, Amazon trucks stacked up like dominoes at the end of the block. Within 48 hours, I had a voicemail inbox full of friendly reminders from HOA board members, a hand-delivered cease and desist, which I used as a coaster, and an email from someone named Greg Monroe, HOA counsel, that read, "Mr. Benton, we demand immediate access restoration under implied utility rights of way." I replied with a single sentence, "I imply nothing, Greg." Then I blocked his number. I wasn't done. With the gate locked and the HOA flailing, I sent Nate's survey, video documentation, and a legal complaint to the county zoning board, highlighting unauthorized road construction and illegal land use. Then I forwarded everything to a local news reporter I'd met once at a hardware store fundraiser. She had a knack for HOA horror stories and an audience hungry for them. By Friday, my inbox was flooded. The story blew up. Veteran rancher fights back against HOA road grab. 3,000 shares in 24 hours, angry comments, supportive emails. Someone even offered to send a fruit basket. But the cherry on top? That weekend, the HOA tried to host their annual Harvest Festival, only they couldn't use the southern parking overflow because yours truly now owned the entrance. I stood at the gate, arms crossed, watching as minivans circled like confused ducks, looking for a place to land. Cheryl stormed up to me again. "This is harassment," she hissed. "No," I said calmly, "this is property rights." It only took 5 days for the HOA's glossy little empire to start peeling at the corners. By Monday morning, the local paper had picked up the story. Headline right there above the fold, "HOA road, paved through rancher's property without permission. Owner locks gate, sparks legal showdown." They even used a photo of me standing in front of the house gate, arms crossed, coffee mug in hand, and Scout sitting proudly at my feet like a sidekick in a spaghetti western. That alone might have been enough. But then the TV crews showed up. Channel 4 rolled up in a van, and I gave them a full walkthrough. The crushed shed, the paved over easement, the fancy south entry arch that I was now renting out to squirrels. I even let them film Cheryl's ridiculous laminated sign that was still zip-tied to the original construction cone I'd left near the HOA entrance. It aired that evening, and the next morning, Willow Crest's phones melted down. Residents were pissed. People who'd paid HOA fees expecting peace and exclusive amenities were now stuck navigating orange cones, blocked delivery routes, and PR nightmares. One guy showed up at my gate just to shake my hand. Another one brought pie. A third came to scream at me for ruining community morale until I showed him the deed and the survey overlay. He stood there, blinking like a man who just found out Santa was a felon. "They really paved this on your land?" "Yep. They told us it was all HOA common space." "Tell that to my apple trees. They're still recovering." Word spread fast, and it didn't help the HOA's case that Cheryl, God bless her delusions, kept doubling down. She sent out an official HOA bulletin to all residents that called me a non-compliant parcel actor. What the hell is that? A new Marvel villain? She also claimed the road situation was temporary and that the board was engaged in diplomatic dialogue with the affected party, which was a bold way of saying, we stole it and now we're negotiating with the guy we stole it from. I posted the bulletin on my fence with a sticky note that read, "Still haven't heard from your diplomats. Try sending cookies." That week, the real blow came from the county. An inspector named Hal Becker rolled up in a dusty Ford with a clipboard and a no BS face. I'd met him once during a water inspection. He didn't like paperwork. He loved citing people. We walked the road together. He took photos, paced out distances, checked the concrete footings. The man even brought a wheel measure. At one point, he paused, squinting at the base of a drainage culvert. "That's a code violation," he muttered. "Sloped improperly. Water's gonna back up right into that fence." "That fence is mine," I said. "Good. Maybe they'll owe you flood insurance too." By the time he left, he'd slapped 2 violation notices on the HOA for unpermitted construction and improper runoff management. I asked him what happens next. "They'll be fined, heavily," he said, climbing into his truck, "and they'll have to answer to the zoning board." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "You ever think about running for that board?" I laughed. "I don't have enough patience or whiskey." He grinned. "Shame." The final crack in the dam came from inside the HOA itself. An anonymous letter showed up in my mailbox, no return address, just a short typed note. Most of us didn't know what Cheryl was doing. She never told us the road crossed property lines. A few board members are furious, expect resignation soon, sorry for the mess. And sure enough, that Friday, 2 board members stepped down. One cited a lack of transparency and increasing legal exposure as reasons. I just called it common sense waking up late. That same day, a local homeowner named Brian, a middle school science teacher with a receding hairline and too much stress in his shoulders, came by and offered to mediate between me and the remaining board. "We just want the mess to end," he said. I nodded. "Me too." "But you're not backing down?" I looked him square in the eye. "Brian, if they'd come to me like normal people, I'd have heard them out. But they bulldozed my shed, paved over my land, and tried to gaslight me into pretending I didn't notice. So number, I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever." He sighed. Fair. The legal case dragged on for a while, as these things tend to do. Marcus ran point, shredding every claim the HOA threw at us. They tried to argue communal intent, and aesthetic cohesion, like those were legal terms and not phrases lifted from a Pottery Barn brochure. He buried them in paperwork, photos, surveys, drone footage, signed statements from county officials, and a full video walkthrough of the road they paved across my land, complete with sarcastic commentary. When the judge saw the footage, she didn't even let it get to trial. Her ruling was short, brutal, and poetic. The defendant is the sole legal owner of the land in question. The HOA acted beyond its authority, constructed on private property without consent, and pursued frivolous litigation in an attempt to retroactively justify unlawful action. Case dismissed, damages awarded. They owed me $37,000 in damages, plus legal fees, plus mandatory removal of the illegal road. And, this was the part Marcus insisted on for fun, they were required to issue a written public apology to me and their own residents. I got the letter a week later, official Willowcrest Enclave letterhead, Cheryl's signature at the bottom, barely legible like she signed it through gritted teeth. I laminated it and nailed it to the fence post right under the big red banner. Then I added a smaller sign underneath it. Sometimes the system works. The teardown happened on a Friday. Contractors came out with jackhammers, dump trucks, and a lot of confused looks. HOA board members were nowhere to be seen. The south entry sign came down first, then the arch, then the asphalt, peeled away in strips and hauled off piece by piece. By sundown, there was nothing left but a scar in the dirt. I stood on the porch with Scout and watched the whole thing, coffee in hand. It felt like closure. Life's been quiet since. The new HOA board doesn't bother me. I hear Cheryl resigned for personal reasons, though rumor has it someone caught her trying to file another annexation plan in a different county. Old habits die slow. I rebuilt the shed, bigger this time. Put in a reinforced steel door and a weatherproof lockbox just in case some future genius gets another vision for the community. The gate's still up, so is the fence, so is the banner. Every now and then I catch someone slowing down to read it, usually new residents who weren't here for the show. They pause, stare, and keep driving, real respectful-like. That's the thing about boundaries. Once you make it clear they're not up for debate, people tend to leave you the hell alone. And me? I sit on the porch most mornings with a hot mug and a good view. Not of mountains, not of trees, just an empty patch of land where their fake road used to be. And let me tell you, it's the most peaceful thing I've ever seen.